The kindness. It was a cold, gray afternoon when Maya, a bright 9-year-old girl, walked home from school. She had her backpack on her shoulders, the straps digging into her small frame, but she didn't mind. The thought of getting home and sitting down with a warm bowl of soup made her smile. As Maya walked down the familiar sidewalk, she noticed something unusual. Sitting in the corner of the street was a woman, shivering. She was wrapped in an old, dirty blanket, but it didn't seem to help. The woman's face looked tired, and her eyes were filled with sadness. Her clothes were ragged, and her shoes had holes in them. Maya's heart sank as she realized the woman was homeless, sitting alone on the street, with no one stopping to help her. Maya had always been a kind-hearted girl. She was raised to help others whenever she could, no matter how small the gesture. Without thinking much, Maya approached the woman. The cold air hit her face, but it didn't bother her as much as the sight of the woman who was in need. "Excuse me, ma'am," Maya said softly, her voice full of concern. The woman looked up in surprise, wiping her eyes. She had clearly not expected anyone to talk to her. "Hello, sweetie," the woman said with a small, tired smile. "What can I do for you?" Maya hesitated for a moment. She looked at the woman's cold, shaking hands, and then she glanced down at her own scarf. It was the gift her grandmother had given her for her birthday last month. The scarf was soft and warm, and it was one of her most treasured possessions. But in that moment, something about the woman's sadness tugged at her heart. Maya knew she couldn't just walk away. She reached up and slowly untied the scarf from around her neck. She held it in her small hands, looking down at the soft fabric. After a moment, she turned back to the woman. "Here," Maya said, holding out the scarf to her. "I think you need this more than I do." The woman's eyes widened with surprise. She looked at Maya, then at the scarf, as if unsure of what to say. Maya could see the woman's hands shaking, not just from the cold, but also from disbelief. No one had ever offered her something so kind before. "Oh, honey, are you sure?" the woman asked, her voice shaky. Maya nodded, her expression serious but gentle. "Yes, I'm sure. I want you to be warm." The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to take the scarf. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Maya smiled softly. "You're welcome. Please stay warm," she said, turning to walk away. As Maya continued down the street, she felt a warmth inside her heart. It wasn't from the scarf, but from the kindness she had just shared. She hadn't expected anything in return. She had simply seen someone in need and tried to help, just as her grandmother had always taught her. It was a simple act, but it made her feel good inside. She thought about her grandmother's words. The smallest acts of kindness can make the biggest difference. But Maya didn't know that this small, kind gesture would lead to something much bigger. She didn't know that her innocent act of compassion would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. What she didn't know, as she walked home with a smile on her face, was that the woman she had helped wasn't just any ordinary homeless person. She was part of something much more complicated, something much darker. Maya walked the rest of the way home, feeling lighter with every step. She had done a good thing, and that was all that mattered. The world seemed a little brighter, and her heart felt full. As she entered her house, she waved at her mother, who was standing in the kitchen. "I'm home, Mom," Maya called out. Her mother turned around and smiled, but Maya's thoughts were still on the woman she had helped. She had no idea that the kindness she had shown would soon lead her into a world she didn't understand, a world that would put her and her family in great danger. For now, Maya simply enjoyed the feeling of having done something good. She had no way of knowing that her life was about to change forever. And all of it started with a simple act of kindness. The unexpected knock. The following morning, Maya awoke to the soft sound of birds chirping outside her window. The sun was barely rising, casting a warm glow through the curtains. She stretched and yawned, thinking about the day ahead. It was Saturday, and she was looking forward to spending the day with her family. But what Maya didn't know was that her life was about to take an unexpected turn. As she sat at the kitchen table eating her breakfast, her mother, Linda, was busy preparing pancakes. Maya's father, John, was reading the newspaper as he sipped his coffee. The usual calm and peaceful morning was interrupted by a loud knock on the front door. It wasn't the kind of knock that came from friends or neighbors, but rather it was urgent and firm. Maya's mother, Linda, paused and looked at the door, a bit puzzled. Who could it be at this hour? John set down the newspaper and stood up, walking toward the door. Maya's heart skipped a beat. The loud, sudden sound of knocking made her feel uneasy. She had no idea who it could be, but something about the way the knock echoed in the quiet house made her feel like something was off. John opened the door, and there, standing on the porch, were two police officers. Both of them looked serious, their uniforms pressed neatly, but their expressions were stern and hard to read. Maya's mother walked over from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, sensing that this wasn't a regular visit. "Can we help you, officers?" John asked, his voice calm but with a hint of concern. "We're looking for a little girl named Maya," one of the officers said, his voice sharp but not unkind. "Is she here?" Maya stood up slowly from her seat, her heart racing. She didn't know what was going on, but the sound of her name made everything feel a little too real. She walked toward her parents, standing behind her father. "I'm Maya," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer's eyes moved over to her. "You are the one who helped a homeless woman yesterday, correct?" Maya nodded slowly, still unsure of why the police were asking about it. "Yes, I gave her my scarf," Maya replied, her eyes wide with confusion. She glanced at her mother, who seemed just as puzzled. "But why are the police here?" The officer took a step forward, his face softening. "Maya, we need you to come with us. There's been an issue that we need to talk to you about. It's serious." Maya's mind raced as she looked at her parents. They didn't seem alarmed, but Maya could see the worry in her mother's eyes. Her father's expression was more serious than usual, but he didn't say anything. "I don't understand," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "What's happening? Why do the police need to talk to me?" Before the officer could answer, Linda stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Why does this involve my daughter? Is she in trouble?" The officer hesitated, looking at his partner before responding. "No, ma'am. Your daughter isn't in trouble, but the woman she helped is involved in something that's much more complicated than we originally thought." Maya's heart sank. She didn't know what they meant, but it sounded serious. The woman she had helped wasn't just some stranger. Maya had no idea that the simple act of kindness she had shown would tie her to something bigger, a situation she could never have imagined. "Why don't you come inside and tell us what's going on?" John said, opening the door wider. "We need to understand what this is about." The officers stepped inside, and Maya's stomach churned as she sat back down at the table. Her mother and father exchanged worried glances as the officers began explaining what had happened. The woman Maya had helped the day before, the homeless woman sitting on the street, was actually part of an ongoing investigation. Unknown to Maya, the woman had been a key witness to a series of criminal activities involving powerful people. She had been on the run, hiding from those who wanted to silence her. When Maya had given her the scarf, she had unknowingly become connected to something much bigger. The officers didn't want to scare her, but they needed her to come to the station to answer some questions. The woman was now missing, and they feared for her safety. Maya sat in stunned silence, unable to fully grasp what the officers were saying. The kind gesture she had made in the warmth of her own heart was now the center of a police investigation. It was clear that this wasn't just about a scarf anymore. "Maya, you've done nothing wrong," the officer assured her, his tone gentler now. "We just need to understand what happened and how you became involved. It's very important." Maya nodded, still trying to make sense of it all. How had her simple act of kindness become something so complicated? Why had it led to this strange visit from the police? As the officers spoke more, Maya's parents stayed close, offering her silent support. But in the back of Maya's mind, she couldn't help but feel a growing unease. What had she really gotten involved in? And would she be able to help the woman she had met before it was too late? The hidden truth. Maya felt like the world around her had suddenly shifted. One minute, she was just a little girl helping someone in need, and now she was the center of a police investigation. Her mind raced as the officers continued to explain, but the words felt blurry, like she couldn't fully understand the gravity of the situation. As they sat in the kitchen, the two officers went into more detail about the woman Maya had helped. Her name was Evelyn. She was not just a homeless woman. She had been hiding from a dangerous group of people. The group was involved in illegal activities, and they had been searching for Evelyn for weeks. Maya had no idea that the woman she had shared her scarf with was connected to such a dangerous situation. "We believe that Evelyn was trying to get out of town and start a new life," one of the officers explained. "But she couldn't do it alone. She had to rely on others. And that's where you came in, Maya." Maya felt her stomach twist. She never imagined that something as simple as giving away her scarf would lead to such trouble. Evelyn had seemed so kind and grateful. She hadn't been dangerous or threatening. She had just looked like someone who needed help. Maya's mother, Linda, kept her hand on Maya's shoulder, trying to comfort her. She could see that Maya was shaken, and it hurt to see her daughter so confused and scared. But at the same time, Linda couldn't help but feel the growing concern that something was wrong. Why would the police come to their house for something like this? How deep did this situation really go? "Maya," the officer continued, "we don't want to scare you, but it's important that we follow every lead. Evelyn isn't just any homeless person. She's someone with information that could help us uncover a large criminal operation." Maya's eyes widened. She hadn't known any of this. She thought she was just helping someone who was struggling, but now she realized that her simple act of kindness had somehow tied her to a much bigger and far more dangerous situation. "Why are you telling me all of this?" Maya asked softly. "I didn't know anything about Evelyn's past. I just gave her my scarf." The officer nodded. "I understand that, Maya. You did nothing wrong. But now we need your help. We believe that Evelyn trusted you. She may have seen you as someone who could help her in a way no one else could." Maya sat back, her heart beating faster. She never imagined that her simple act of kindness could have such far-reaching consequences. How could she help Evelyn now? She had no idea where the woman had gone or what had happened to her. "What can we do to help?" John asked, his voice calm but laced with concern. "Is there anything we can do to find her?" The officer paused for a moment, thinking carefully. "Right now, the best thing you can do is stay in touch with us. If you remember anything at all, that could help us, we need you to tell us right away. And if Evelyn reaches out to you, we need to know immediately." Maya nodded, still processing everything. She was just a little girl, but she felt like she had been thrust into a world that was much bigger and more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The officers finished their conversation and left, but the weight of their words lingered. Maya and her parents sat in silence, unsure of what to do next. Maya's mind kept returning to Evelyn. What had happened to her? Where had she gone? And most importantly, was she safe? As the day passed, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. Her simple act of kindness had set off a chain of events she couldn't control. And now it seemed that she was caught in the middle of something much bigger than herself. That night, as Maya lay in bed, her mind raced with questions. The images of Evelyn's grateful smile kept flashing before her eyes. The woman had been so kind and thankful, and now Maya couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to her. What do we do now? Maya whispered to herself, staring up at the ceiling in the dark. What if Evelyn needs me? What if I could have done something to help her? But deep down, Maya knew that she had done what she could. She had given the woman her scarf, a simple act of kindness that had made a difference in someone's life, even if it had led to something unexpected. The next morning, Maya woke up early, feeling restless. She couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn, about the police officers, and about the danger that now seemed to surround her. Her parents tried to reassure her, but Maya couldn't help but feel that her life had changed forever. And as she sat at the breakfast table with her family, she knew that the adventure she had unwittingly found herself in wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The search for Evelyn. The days after the police visit passed in a blur for Maya. She couldn't focus on anything. Her mind constantly returned to Evelyn. What had happened to her? Was she okay? Maya kept replaying the brief moments she had spent with the woman, the kindness in her eyes, and the way Evelyn had clung to the scarf like it was the most precious thing in the world. Maya's parents, too, seemed uneasy. They were trying to move on with their lives, but the shadow of the police visit still hung over them. John kept calling the local police station, trying to get updates, but they always told him the same thing. "We're still looking into it. We'll let you know if we need anything." It felt like they were all waiting for something. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen, something that would change everything again. One afternoon, while Maya was outside playing in the yard, she noticed something strange. A black SUV had slowly driven past her house and then turned down the street. It was the same type of car that had been parked near the alley where she had met Evelyn. Her heart raced as she watched the vehicle disappear around the corner. She ran back inside to tell her parents, but when she opened the door, she froze. A police officer was standing in the living room, talking to her father. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Was it about Evelyn again? Were they close to finding her? "Maya, come here," her father called softly. She walked slowly into the room, her mind buzzing with questions. "This is Officer Collins," her father said, introducing the tall, serious-looking officer. "He's here to talk to us about Evelyn again." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She sat down next to her father, her eyes never leaving Officer Collins. "Hello, Maya," the officer said, his voice calm but firm. "I need to ask you a few questions. This is about Evelyn, the woman you helped with your scarf." Maya nodded, her hands nervously gripping the edge of the couch. "I've been trying to find out more about her, and I believe she may have left some clues behind. We have reason to believe that Evelyn wasn't just running from her past. She was trying to warn us about something," Officer Collins continued, his voice growing more intense. "We think she might have known something dangerous, something that could put people at risk." Maya's heart skipped a beat. What could Evelyn have known that was so important? And why had she trusted Maya enough to ask for help? "She told you anything, Maya?" Officer Collins asked, his gaze piercing as if he could read her every thought. Maya shook her head. "No, sir. She didn't say much. She was just really kind. She didn't look like someone who was in trouble. She just seemed lost." Officer Collins nodded, seemingly lost in thought. "That's the thing, Maya. She was trying to hide something. She was trying to escape, but the people she was running from, they're dangerous, and they know you helped her. You're now involved in something much bigger than you think." Maya's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What are they after? Why would they come after me?" Officer Collins sighed, taking a step closer to her. "We don't know everything yet, but we believe they're after information. Evelyn was part of a group that uncovered a large criminal network, human trafficking. She got too close to something she shouldn't have. And now people who want to keep their secrets hidden might be looking for her." Maya's eyes widened. Human trafficking? How was Evelyn involved in something so horrible? And why would they come after her? She was just a little girl who had shared a scarf with someone who seemed desperate. "Maya," Officer Collins said, his tone turning softer, "you're not in danger right now, but we need you to be careful. If Evelyn contacts you, if she reaches out in any way, we need to know. You're a key part of this investigation, and for your safety, we need to make sure you're protected." Maya couldn't believe it. She was part of a criminal investigation now. Her simple act of kindness had pulled her into a world she didn't understand. "I understand," Maya said quietly, even though she wasn't sure she did. Officer Collins gave her a small smile. Good. I know this is a lot to take in, Maya, but we're counting on you. And you're stronger than you think. After Officer Collins left, Maya sat in stunned silence. Her head was spinning with everything she had just learned. It was so much to process. How could something like this happen to her? She had just wanted to help. Her father was sitting next to her, his arm around her shoulder. We'll get through this, he said softly. I promise. But Maya wasn't so sure. The world felt different now. Everything had changed. And she knew that her simple act of kindness had set off a chain of events that could never be undone. That night, as she lay in bed, Maya stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She kept thinking about Evelyn. Where was she now? Was she safe? And why had she trusted Maya with that simple scarf? Maya couldn't answer those questions, but one thing was clear. Her life would never be the same again. And somehow, she was going to have to face whatever came next, no matter how scary or dangerous it might be. The mysterious visit. Days passed, and Maya couldn't shake the weight of everything she had learned. The police had been keeping a watchful eye on her family, and there was a constant tension in the air. Though her parents tried to keep everything as normal as possible, Maya could sense that something was always off. She no longer felt safe just being a kid. The reality of Evelyn's situation, of human trafficking and dangerous criminals, had changed her world forever. But even more chilling than the police's warnings were the strange occurrences that had begun to happen around her house. First, there was the unmarked van that had parked down the street late at night. It wasn't unusual for people to park in the area, but the van was there for hours. It never moved. Maya's curiosity had gotten the best of her, but by the time she grabbed her phone to take a picture, the van had already left. Then there was the strange phone call. Late one evening, when her parents were out, the phone rang. Maya picked it up hesitantly, expecting it to be a telemarketer. But when she answered, no one spoke. She could hear only faint breathing on the other end, like someone was listening but didn't want to speak. After what seemed like an eternity, the line went dead. Maya felt her heart pounding in her chest. Who had called? And why didn't they speak? Was it someone from Evelyn's past? Someone dangerous? The police had told her to stay alert, and she did. But how could a young girl be expected to face the terrifying unknown of criminals targeting her family? Maya had no answers, only a growing sense of fear. And then, as if the universe had decided to confirm her worst fears, there was a knock at the door. It was late in the afternoon, the sun dipping below the horizon. Maya's parents weren't home yet, and the house was eerily quiet. Maya was sitting in the living room, glancing out the window, lost in her thoughts. When the knock came, she jumped, startled by the sound. Cautiously, she stood up and peered through the peephole. A man stood on the other side of the door, dressed in a dark suit. His expression was unreadable, his face partially hidden under the brim of a hat. Maya felt a cold chill run down her spine. She didn't recognize him. "Who is it?" Maya called out, her voice shaking. The man's eyes locked onto hers through the peephole, but he didn't respond. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat, unsure of what to do. Should she open the door? Her mind raced with the stories she had heard about dangerous people coming to collect debts, or worse, threatening people who had witnessed things they shouldn't have. Was this one of those situations? Maya stood frozen in place. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she quickly grabbed it, thankful for the distraction. It was a message from her dad. "Stay inside. Don't answer the door for anyone." The message sent a wave of relief through her, but also a pang of dread. If her father was warning her, then this man couldn't be trusted. Maya backed away from the door, her pulse racing. The man outside knocked again, more urgently this time. "Go away," Maya whispered to herself, clutching the phone tightly. But the man didn't leave. Instead, she heard him say something under his breath, too quietly for her to understand. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, The knock stopped. Maya's heart still raced as she stared at the door. The stranger had left, but the unease in her stomach didn't fade. What did he want? Why had he come? And why hadn't he spoken to her? She didn't know what to do next. The whole situation felt wrong. It wasn't just the strange man. It was the feeling that something was happening behind the scenes, something far bigger than she could comprehend. Her simple act of kindness had thrown her into a world of danger, and there was no turning back now. Maya decided to call Officer Collins. He had been the one to explain everything to her in the first place, so he was the only person she trusted enough to tell about the strange visitor. When she reached Officer Collins, she didn't waste time with small talk. "There was a man at the door," she said, her voice trembling. "He didn't say who he was. He just stared at me through the peephole. And when I didn't answer, he said something, but I couldn't hear him. Then he left. What do I do?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maya's stomach twisted as she waited for the officer's response. "Maya, stay calm. This might be a part of what we're dealing with. We need to investigate further. Don't leave the house. Don't open the door unless it's someone you recognize. We'll send someone to check on you shortly. You're not alone in this." The reassurance in Officer Collins's voice was a small comfort, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the danger was closer than ever before. She hung up the phone and turned her attention back to the door, her eyes darting nervously toward the window. What was happening? Why was this happening to her? And who was the man who had knocked on the door? She didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. Her life had been turned upside down, and she wasn't going to get any peace until she figured out what was really going on. The truth unveiled. The days following the mysterious visit were filled with unease. Maya couldn't focus on anything: school, her friends, or even her favorite books. The knock at the door had shaken her to her core. The man in the dark suit hadn't returned, but his presence still haunted her thoughts. Who was he? And what did he want? Officer Collins had promised to send someone to check on her, but no one had come by yet. Maya had been waiting, her eyes scanning the street from the window every few minutes, looking for any sign of movement, any clue that would explain the strange events that had turned her life upside down. Her parents were still in the dark about the man at the door, and Maya wasn't sure whether she should tell them. They had enough to deal with already. What with all the police investigations into the human trafficking ring and Evelyn's sudden disappearance, Maya didn't want to add more worry to their already heavy hearts. It was late one evening when things finally began to make sense. Maya was sitting alone in the living room, flipping through a magazine, trying to take her mind off the strange events. The sound of tires crunching on gravel outside caught her attention. She looked up, her eyes narrowing as she stared out the window. The black SUV had pulled up in front of the house. It wasn't the same van from the other night, but the SUV had the same menacing feel. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and her heart began to race. Was this the man from the door, or was it someone else from the police department? She didn't have much time to wonder. The vehicle's engine cut off, and two men stepped out. They were dressed in dark suits, just like the man who had knocked on her door. One of the men glanced up at the window, catching her staring. His expression was unreadable, but Maya quickly ducked down, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no way she could sit here and wait for them to knock on the door again. This time, she had to do something. She grabbed her phone and dialed Officer Collins. Her fingers were trembling as she pressed the call button. She couldn't let them catch her off guard again. "Maya, what's going on?" Officer Collins answered quickly. "There's another car outside," she whispered, glancing cautiously out the window. Two men got out. They looked like the man who came to the door before. "What should I do?" "Stay inside," Officer Collins said firmly. "Don't open the door for anyone, and don't answer the phone if it's not from a number you recognize. We're on our way, but you need to be careful." Maya could hear the urgency in his voice. That made her even more frightened. What was happening? Who were these men? And why were they watching her? She sat back down on the couch, gripping her phone tightly, her mind racing. The doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat. It was them. She knew it. They were here again. The doorbell rang again, this time more urgently. She heard the men speaking through the door, their voices muffled but unmistakably demanding. Maya stayed as quiet as possible, praying they wouldn't break in. She knew she had to keep calm. She couldn't let them see her panic. They had already been watching her, and she couldn't afford to make a mistake. The sound of a loud knock startled her. It echoed through the house, shaking her to her very core. Maya jumped, her breath catching in her throat. What were they doing here? Why didn't they just leave? Maya? Her father's voice called from the front door, sending a wave of relief through her. Her father was home. She wasn't alone anymore. Maya opened the door, her father standing there, looking concerned but calm. Behind him stood 2 police officers, both men from earlier. Maya didn't know what to make of this sudden arrival. Had the police been investigating the men outside? Why hadn't they told her about it? "Dad, what's going on?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We'll explain everything in a minute, sweetheart," her father said gently, placing his hand on her shoulder. "But for now, we need to go somewhere safe." Maya stared at him, confused. "Safe? What do you mean?" The police officers stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room, the tension in their posture obvious. "There's something you need to know," Officer Collins said, his voice grave. "The men who have been following you aren't just criminals. They're part of a much bigger operation, an operation that we've been trying to take down for months." Maya's stomach churned. She had heard whispers of human trafficking, but never in her wildest dreams did she imagine she would be caught up in something so dark, so dangerous. The fact that these men had been targeting her family was horrifying. Her father sighed deeply, glancing at the police officers. "It's true. The people we've been working with, helping Evelyn, are connected to this larger crime ring. You were never supposed to be involved in this, Maya, but somehow your kindness with the homeless woman has brought you into their sights." Maya's mind spun. Everything was starting to click together, but it was more than she could handle. How had things gotten so out of control? "And now, they know we're onto them," Officer Collins added. "We've been trying to track down their leader, but every step forward seems to lead to another dead end." Maya felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. How could she, just a little girl, stop this? How could she protect her family from these dangerous people? But one thing was clear. Her life had changed forever. She couldn't go back to the way things were before she met Evelyn. The stakes were too high now. As the officers prepared to escort Maya and her family to a safer location, she couldn't help but wonder, would they ever truly be safe in a new beginning? The police officers ushered Maya and her family into the waiting car, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Maya's heart was still racing, her mind filled with 100 questions. The night had been a blur of confusion and fear. What would happen next? Would the men who had been following them ever leave them alone? Her father sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder, offering a comforting presence, but even he couldn't shake the look of worry in his eyes. Officer Collins, who had stayed close to their family throughout this ordeal, now sat in the front seat, speaking with another officer on the radio. As they drove through the quiet streets, Maya couldn't help but think about the woman she had helped, the homeless woman who had started this whole chain of events. She had only given her a scarf out of kindness, never imagining it would lead to all this chaos. But now, it seemed like her simple act of compassion had opened a door to something much darker. "We're going to be okay," her father said, his voice steady, though Maya could hear the tension beneath his words. "The police are doing everything they can. We're going to be safe." But Maya wasn't sure if she believed him anymore. How could they be safe when so many people seemed to be after them? The police, the mysterious men in suits, and the dark figures that had been watching them. It all felt so overwhelming. They arrived at a safe house, a place her father had arranged for them to stay until everything settled down. It was a small, secure building tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. There were no flashing lights, no crowds, no noise. It felt like a different world compared to the chaos they had just left behind. As the family stepped inside, the weight of the situation settled in. Maya's mom hugged her tightly, not letting go for several moments. It was a rare moment of calm, and Maya clung to it. She missed her old life, the one where everything felt safe and simple. But now, that world was gone. Officer Collins, who had followed them into the house, made sure everything was secure. He assured them that they would be safe here and that they wouldn't be alone. More officers would be on watch, ensuring that no one would get past the walls of their temporary sanctuary. "Your kindness is what led us here, Maya," Officer Collins said as he prepared to leave. "And it's what will help us stop these people from hurting others. They know you're not like the rest of the people they target, and that's why they're scared. But they're not invincible. We're going to put an end to this." Maya nodded quietly. She didn't fully understand everything that was going on, but she did know one thing for sure. She was done being afraid. She had faced something terrifying and had come out of it stronger. And now, with the support of her family and the police, she was ready to face whatever came next. As the door closed behind Officer Collins, Maya looked around the small room. It felt safe, but it was also empty. Her world had been turned upside down, and now everything was uncertain. Her father sat next to her, placing a hand on her knee. "Maya, I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. And we'll keep fighting for what's right." Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide. She had never seen her father so serious, but she also saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. No matter how bad things seemed, they would stand together. "I promise, Dad," she said softly. And with that promise, Maya knew she could face whatever the future held. She didn't know how it would all play out, but she was ready to be part of the fight to stop the evil that had threatened their lives. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Maya knew one thing for sure. The world might have been shaken by her kindness, but she was not going to let it break her. The real battle was just beginning, and she was ready to face it head on.